Welcome to my shop! This is a video a lot of you have asked for, a shop tour in my basement shop. I will show you all the tools, how I position them, and a few little features and tricks I've engaged over the years. But before I move you around, let me tell you a little bit about this space. I've been in the shop for the last 3 years now. It is 3.2 by 5.8 meters in size. That equals around 18.5 square meters or 200 square feet. So it's in the basement of our house, which is a curse and a blessing. The blessing, of course, is I can work all year long in t-shirt or pullover. I don't have to worry about rust on the tools, and it's just convenient. Also, the noise level for the neighbors is a big factor. I can work all night in here. I can even work when the kids are asleep upstairs. The downside, of course, is getting all the stuff downstairs. Getting the big tools like the table saw or the bandsaw, the jointer downstairs was just a pain, and it was one of the most terrifying days in my life. I bought them and then hired somebody to transport them down. It was raining, so I was very worried about the tools getting water on it and rust with all these cast iron surfaces. That costed me some nerves. And also getting the lumber for bigger projects in here is quite challenging, and I sometimes cannot do it on my own. To come up with the layout of this shop, I printed everything on paper and moved it around until I had a layout that I was happy with it. I changed a few things over time, but it's pretty much the same as I have when I bought the first tools. Okay, let's move around, and I think we will start with the big five: table saw, dust collector, bandsaw, jointer, and workbench. This is the tool I get the most questions about. It's my table saw. It's the Hammer K3 Winner sliding table saw, European style. And it has this sliding table, and basically you put your workpiece on the sliding table and can push it through the blade. You can also lock the table in place like this and then use it as a standard cabinet table saw. I almost ended up importing a cabinet saw, more specifically a saw stop, because I really like the technology and keep my fingers safe. But I have to say, with a sliding table saw, your fingers don't even get close to the blade. Most of the time, I work with Fritz in France. I have my fingers here, one hand here, the other one supporting the workpiece, and as you can see, they're almost 30 centimeters away from the blade, so there's no real danger to cut into my finger. Also, the sliding table makes it very easy to handle larger workpieces. Formatting sheet goods on a sliding table saw is a breeze. It's so much fun, you feel so efficient, it's just great. The sliding table is also great to crush some epoxy live edge rivet dreams. For example, if you have a big slab and want to make a rip cut, which is pretty dangerous on a standard cabinet saw, you can drop your slab on here, secure it to the sliding table, and then push it through the blade. The offcut has enough space to go here, and the slab is secured here and cannot create kickback then. The sliding table also accepts this Crosscut Fence. It's basically just a heavy-duty miter gauge. You can set your angle here and have a positive stop for 90 degrees. There's also a bigger outrigger table, but I don't have the space. It would get pretty narrow to the jointer table, to the jointer planar combo over there. And yeah, maybe in a bigger shop I would get it. Still, I went with some optional upgrades on this saw. I want to take you through that. I have the big motor in here, which has 4 horsepower. It's plenty. I've never bogged down the saw to this point. The sliding table is also the bigger version. There's a 1.3 meter version and the 2 meter version. This is the 2 meter version. And for the parallel fence, I went with the heavy duty fence with micro adjustment here and with an 800 millimeter ripping capacity. If I would buy the saw again, I would take one more upgrade, and that's you can have the saw as the B3, which then has a shaper in here, which is pretty cool actually. So there's this hole which is covered up with a lid, also cast iron, and then yeah, you have a shaper in here as well. To have a little bit more outfeed support, I have my router table set up right next to my saw. It's a little bit lower than the saw itself, and we will get to the router table later. Let me know in the comments if you have any more questions about the saw or about other tools. I'm glad to answer them, and I try to answer them all. And now let's move on to the next saw, which is the bandsaw. The bandsaw is placed right next to the door. It's the Hammer N4400. I mostly use it to resaw boards, and overall I'm pretty happy with the machine. Resawing even larger boards on that machine works totally fine. I have a resawing capacity of 30 centimeters, which is the same capacity as my Planar Jointer, so they kind of work in parallel. The biggest resawing job for that machine was resawing some 30 centimeter oak boards. It worked very good and the result was nice. I only had a drift of about 0.5 millimeter to 1 millimeter, which is totally acceptable for me. And it was a 2-meter board. So right now the tracking between the top and the bottom wheel is pretty much off. So the band is rolling on the top wheel very much in the front and on the bottom wheel very much at the back. I have to work on that and adjust it. Adjusting tools is not my favorite thing to do, so I tend to put it off until it really bothers me. One thing that I don't like about the saw is the dust collection. The dust collection is only fair or okay. There's no dust flying around in the air. That's all sealed within the cabinet. But the cabinet itself is not sealed, which means when the sawdust gets into the cabinet, it also just falls out at some points. So for example here, it falls out of the cabinet, and also on the bottom there is always a pile of dust building up. I think there's a pretty easy fix to that. Just seal the cabinet. Yeah, I could do it myself, but seems like it's not bothering me enough to do something about it. Speaking of dust collection, my dust collector is over here. I know it looks more like a stealth fighter than a dust collector, but it collects dust. I named it Dust Vader. Thanks Dominic Ricker for the name. I really like it, and yeah, kind of gives me a tickle every time I take a look at it. It's a cyclone dust collector. It's the Laguna P-Flux 3. It has a cyclone, so it separates the dust before it enters the filter. The filter is enclosed in here. It also has this noise reduction foam in it, so it's not too loud. I think it's about 72 decibel. Suction power on this is awesome. Beforehand I had the Bernardo DC450 CF. It was okay. The filter got clogged a lot and it was just a pain to drag the filter outside and blow it out with compressed air. This dust collector, there's no dust entering the filter. All the chips and dust are piling up in the bin. The filter on this dust collector is bigger and it's also filtering finer dust than on the Bernardo. So my lungs really appreciate that. One thing I'm not able to get working on this dust collector is letting it run with a filter bag inside the bin. The bag always gets sucked up into the cyclone and then the separation doesn't work anymore and all the dust is getting into the filter and piles up in here. So if you have this dust collector or know how to make it work with the filter bag, please let me know in the comments. I would really appreciate that, because getting the bin upstairs to dump it then into a bag is just a pain. The dust collector is hooked up to a 120 millimeters or 5-inch ductwork system. I recently upgraded it from 110 millimeter sewage pipe with DIY blast gates to this steel pipes with sealed connectors and also sealed blast gauge. It's just a blessing and I really like it. Beforehand the DIY solution worked okay, but I had so much suction loss because of the blast gates and the connections between the pipe were not 100% sealed. Even there's a sealing ring inside. Yeah, it was just not ideal and I'm really happy I made the upgrade. When talking about the dust collection, I like to mention this air filter. It's positioned right over the table saw and I let it run, especially when I work with some nasty MDF, and all of this dust was in the air and I potentially would breathe it into my lungs, which is pretty horrifying to think about, especially when we talk about MDF dust, which is causing cancer, as well as oak dust, and yeah, I just don't want to have it in my lungs. The dust collector is hooked to an automatic switch on mechanism in the breaker box. However, on this particular dust collector, you cannot permanently turn it on, so I still have to make that work. Speaking of electricity, there's one very important feature in the wiring in this shop for me, which is a main switch. This switch is placed over the door in my shop. It controls all the tools, except for the lighting. Everything electronic in here is going through that. So if I turn it on, I can use my machine, everything is fine. If I turn it off, no machine will turn on, and I don't have to worry about somebody going down here and turning on a machine and getting hurt. This was a very important thing for me to do, especially with 2 kids in the house. Since I've mentioned lighting, as you might be able to tell, it's pretty bright in here. I have 8 of these fluorescent bulbs in here. They are 1.5 meters with 6,500 Kelvin, which is daylight bright. It not only makes it great for filming, but it also makes it nice to work. With that many lights, I almost have no shadows building up in the work areas on the tools, and I can always see what I'm doing. Coming to the workhorse of my shop, which is certainly my Planar Jointer combo. It's also a hammer. It's the A331, and it has a 31 centimeters planing and jointing capacity. I like to use solid wood in my furniture projects, and hence I use this machine in almost every project. I've put a lot of wood through it. I mean, a whole lot. Just to give you an idea, this thing has created about 800 kilos of sawdust in the last 3 years, and I'm still running the first set of blades. The blades, let's get you closer so you can see them. They're so cool to watch. The manufacturer calls this the silent power cutter head. It's basically a segmented cutter head with 47 carbide inserts. The inserts are set at a slight angle, so you have this constant shearing cut, which is not only good on the motor, but it's also pretty nice on figured wood or some nasty grain directions. Pretty much the grain direction doesn't matter with this cutter, and it always creates a nice surface. As I said, I'm still running the first set of blades. You have 4 sides you can use. You simply unscrew the screw here and turn it around 90 degrees and use the other side. I have one more side to go, and then I have to switch out all the carbide inserts. 2 more features I like to point out on that machine are these extensions and also the micro dial indicator for the planing height. I bought the extensions afterwards because when I plane long boards by myself, they tend to tip over, and now with these extensions I can plane longer boards. If I have a very long board, I have these roller stands over here. They're pretty inexpensive. I can set them up and have a support at the in-feet and also at the out-feet table. I have 2 of them. I will transform it now into planar mode, and then I will show you the dial indicator. The dial indicator is an upgrade for that machine, and I think it's really worth the money. It shows you the thickness at which it is planing. You can set it up accurately to 1/10 of a millimeter. So one step here is 1/10 of a millimeter. One full circle is 2 millimeters. And it's very reliable. To set it up, you plane a board, get out your digital calipers, read the value on the calipers, and then set the wheel to that value, lock it in place, and it works really dead on. I mean, each and every time. And I can very much rely on this setting to be accurate. My Workbench. It's a Ulmia Art, which is a German workbench manufacturer. It's a European style bench with a front vise and a tail vise. I don't use the tail vise. I even disassembled the handle to get it closer to the wall. I bought it off a Japanese violin maker here in Berlin, and then I brought it home with my VW Golf, and that was kind of an interesting ride. I arrived here with the bench in the car. I waited until our daughter was asleep, and my wife had to carry it downstairs with me. So a big shout out to my wife for being strong enough to carry a workbench with me. One thing that is special about this bench is the height. It's 90 centimeters high, so it's higher than a standard workbench. It doesn't matter for me because I don't do that much hand tool work. I don't plane boards by hand or thickness plane them, which means a little bit higher with the power tools is totally fine. And also for joinery, it's nicer to have it a little bit higher to see what you're doing. There are a few things that I don't like about this bench. I will get you closer and show you exactly what I mean. One thing that really bothers me about this bench design is the tool storage here. I know I use it all the time to store my tools because I'm too lazy to put them away. But without this, I would put them away because I have to. And here always dust gathers up and just creates a big mess. There's also another reason I don't like this tool storage. When I have a glue up or I want to place my clamps, I cannot place them here because they then tip down into the tool storage. I always have to balance them on this small ridge here, and most of the time they will tip in anyways. And another thing I don't like are the square dog holes. I would like to have 20mm round dog holes here because there are more accessories available. I know I could simply drill 20mm dogs here myself. I don't know, this bench has so much history and I'm hesitant to drill into the top. So yeah, I will just keep complaining about it and eventually build a new bench myself. Both of these reasons why I don't like them are kind of small. You can make the workbench work totally fine for you. I think they're just excuses for me to build my dream workbench, which I really want to do at one point. To be able to move the workbench around, I've put it on these casters. You can drop the bench down still like this and lift it up if you want to move it. Right behind my bench there's my hand tool cabinet. It's one of the first things I've built in the shop. It's not very fancy. These are old kitchen fronts from my mom's kitchen, which I salvaged here and used them. I made quick holders for all the chisels and layout tools and saws here, and my planes just rest on a shelf. Eventually I will build something nice here, but we'll see. One pretty embarrassing mistake I made on this cabinet. I bought some piano hinges and installed them in the wrong direction, but it doesn't matter anyways because I never close it. It's always open and I don't see a reason why to close it. Yeah, a little bit of dust gathers up in there, but right next to my hand tool cabinet there's my drill station. It holds all the chargers, batteries, drills. Over here I can quickly take them out and put them here. It also holds my sandpaper. As you can see, I'm out of 120 and 220mm sanding discs, which is pretty stupid because these are the ones I use the most. I already ordered them and I hopefully get them this week. It also holds my sander. One thing I like about this sanding holders, you know, it takes some time until the sander spins down, and if you put it on your workbench it kind of runs away from you. By hanging it up with a holder here, I can drop it in here while it's still running and don't have to wait until it slows down. Yeah, these shelves here are always pretty messy. I just shove some junk in there, drill bits and all kind of stuff. On the other side of my workbench there's my clamp rack with all my Bessie clamps. At this point I would like to take a minute and talk about sponsorships and make it very transparent for you which tools and machines here are sponsored. A big shout out to Bessie and Festool for supporting what I do. I first had tools from them which I bought myself, and afterwards I thought it was the natural thing to do to work with them and have a cooperation with them because I really like the tools. The clamps are super pristine and it's my favorite clamp, as well as all the Festool power tools I have. It's just a joy to use. So on this rack I have my parallel clamps over here, some parallel clamp accessories that can hold the clamp on your workbench. Then I have more special clamps over here, one-handed clamps and my pipe clamps over here. If you want to build a clamp rack yourself, I have a full video on this clamp rack as well as a free plan. You just have to sign up for my newsletter and get the plan as a PDF. Also behind my workbench is my Festool dust extractor with the cyclone on top, and on top of the cyclone a sustainer with some dust extraction accessories. I really like the cyclone because it separates the dusts and chips and prevents them from going into the filter. Hence I don't have to swap out the filter bag like ever. Filter bags are pretty expensive. Before I had the cyclone I would always empty out the filter bags to get more use out of them. It was just a mess and I did not enjoy doing it, but yeah, saved money. Still, this is the way to go, I think. One more thing I really like about this dust collector is the Bluetooth remote. You always know it. You have the dust hose in your hand, you're off holding something, and then you have to go back to the dust collector to turn it on. With that, it's pretty convenient. You have it right where your hand is and just press the button and the dust collector goes on. Well, you have to plug it in. To the side of my workbench, you've probably already seen there's my flip-top tool cart, which holds my belt disc sander and also my drill press. The cool thing is you can flip the top and still both tools are plugged in because the cable is running in the center of the axle. I have a full video on this build as well as plans, so you might want to check them out if you're in the market for a flip-top tool cart. In the video for the flip-top tool cart, some of you already seen it. It had a bit of a racking left to right. It did not bother me that much, but I still wanted to do something about it. I just screwed these little triangles to the base and the sides, and it works just beautifully. There's no more racking left to right, and it's super easy to retrofit it. Just put it there, a few pocket holes, and you have no more racking in your flip-top tool cart. Let's get on to the router table. Here it is, my new router table. I've been looking forward to build this for quite a while now. It has some cool features. I have tons of storage here. It has a beefy motor and a nice router lift, and also some pretty unnecessary features like remote controlled light in the cabinet. Yeah, I might have watched a little bit too much The Fast and the Furious because it can also do this. Totally unnecessary. We'll have a full video about the router table soon, and as soon as it's available I'm gonna link it at the top. The fence is still missing. I'm waiting for a hardware delivery because I forgot to order some screws, but yeah, I will get them and build a nice sturdy fence. On to the last stop in this room. That's gonna be the Mitre Station, and then we will go to the mystery room. Alright. Between my dust collector and my table saw, there's my miter saw station. The station is not really fancy, it's just a cabinet on casters. And it has two big drawers that are always filled up with junk. I may have to sort them out at one point. I'm not really happy with the situation of the miter saw here because I always have to move it if I want to cut a larger piece on my table saw or if I want to empty out the dust collector. Eventually I will take the miter saw outside and put it into the garage and use it there because I tend to only use it for really big stuff and cross-cut it. And yeah, it's not that often. It's only for stuff I cannot cut at the table saw, and then I think it's fine to go outside, make a cut and come inside again. Okay, are you ready for the next room? The production room? Welcome next door. This is the room I like to think of as my production room. Here I have my CNC in and my drum sander, and of course a dust collector for these two. The CNC is the Avid Pro 4896. I have the same spoilboard layout as Jay Bates has, with the dog holes where I can position multiple work pieces and exactly know where they are in digital space, as well as the T-tracks to clamp the work pieces to the table. Here are now two walnut slabs on that are about to be flattened by the CNC. I mainly use the CNC to make products I can sell. For example, to make the Kumiko blocks. I use it to route the slots in the stops, also the slots in the blocks, as well as engraving the angles on top and also drill the hole for the threaded insert. If you are interested in one of the Kumiko starter kits, check them out, they're in my store, and now you know where the blocks came from. I also use the CNC to make shop jigs like this Domino Station. I plan on creating more shop related products that I can sell, and therefore the CNC is just great to knock out a bunch. I haven't yet used the CNC to make a furniture project, but I think I will do that in the future. The other machine in here is the drum sander. I mainly use it to sand the Kumiko strips to final thickness for the starter kits, as well as the blank Kumiko strips I sell on my store. I also made a video on how to make Kumiko strips. You can check it out somewhere at the top. In here it's pretty much always a mess. Something is going on all the time here. I have some improvised stuff, like the dust collection is not really hooked up to a ductwork yet. Then I have my lumber storage that's just cramped in the corner there with a rack that is way too small. The laptop which controls the CNC is just on an old sewing machine with some drawers on top of it. And I might want to create a nice cart that holds my laptop with the CNC itself. Okay, now you've seen it all, my shop as well as the production room. One of the biggest questions is, would I buy the same tools again and do everything the same I did? Pretty much, yeah. One thing I would change is I would go with better dust collection from the get-go. Dust collection is always not a cool thing to spend money on, but it makes such a huge difference in the end. In the middle of the project, my shop tends to be a huge mess, so don't think it's always that tidy and clean as it was today. And yeah, a bigger shop would be nice for bigger projects. For example, I've built a bed in here, which is a pain because I have to move all the tools several times just to assemble the project and see how it turns out. After I've built my first bed in here, I said I'm never gonna do it again. I've built 4 beds in the last 2 years in here, so that is just stupidity of me. But I don't want to complain. I'm super happy to have this shop. Getting lumber and machines downstairs, I kind of got used to it. My plans for the future for the shop, I want to have it a little bit more organized. I want to have like the accessories for the table saw on one spot on the wall, everything grouped together, and I can just take it and put it there. And I also want to build a nice hand tool cabinet because that's just not reflects the way I work today. And also maybe I'm gonna build a new bench. We'll see about that. And if I do so, you will see it on the channel. Thanks for watching. Remember to give it a thumbs up if you like this shop tour. Hit that subscribe button so you can see all the projects I built here in the shop. If you want to get into Kumiko, check out the starter kits I have on my website. And if you need a plan for the clamp rack or the flip top tool cart, they are also in the store. See you in the next video.